No one in Deadwood ever expected a teenager to crawl into an abandoned cave on a dare and uncover something so terrifying, so unforgettable, that the town would never look at its past the same way again. Jacob Turner had always been the kind of kid who couldn't back down from a challenge, especially when his friends were watching. That hot summer evening in Deadwood, South Dakota, the air buzzed with the hum of cicadas as he stood at the edge of a cave hidden by brush and rock. Everyone in town knew about it, an old abandoned mineshaft carved into the Black Hills. Whispered to be cursed, the kind of place parents warned kids to avoid. But to 16-year-old Jacob, warnings were nothing more than invitations. His friends stood behind him, flashlights in hand, laughing and egging him on, daring him to go inside. Smirked, brushing dust off his jeans, and ducked down to crawl. Through the jagged opening, the air changed immediately. Outside, the evening had been hot and sticky, but inside, the cave breathed cold against his skin, sending a shiver up his spine. His flashlight beam cut through the dark, illuminating damp stone walls that seemed to close in tighter the farther he stepped. The silence was thick, broken only by the crunch of gravel under his boots and the faint drip of water somewhere deeper inside. Jacob forced a steady breath, telling himself it was just a cave, just empty rock, nothing more.
Ow.
But the deeper he went, the heavier the air felt, almost pressing down on his chest. His friend's laughter had faded outside, leaving him alone in the dark passage. Then, as his light swung across the wall, something strange caught his eye. Markings etched deep into the stone, old and rough, but deliberate. They weren't just scratches. They were letters, dates, and shapes, as if someone had once left. A message here. Jacob stepped closer, heart hammering, and realized with a chill that the cave wasn't as empty as he had thought. Jacob ran his fingers lightly over the rough carvings, the stone cool and damp beneath his touch. The markings weren't random. They looked like initials paired with dates, some stretching back over 100 years. One caught his eye immediately. JH-1876, the year Deadwood was founded. His stomach tightened as he remembered stories from school about miners and outlaws who had vanished in these hills, their bodies never found. His flashlight beam shook slightly as he scanned further down the wall. Among the names and dates, there were symbols too, jagged crosses, crude arrows, and one that looked like a handprint pressed deep into the rock, darker than the rest, as if burned into it. He pulled his hand back quickly, unsettled. Soft sound echoed from deeper in the cave, like a faint scrape of stone against stone. Jacob froze, his heart racing. Told himself it had to be water or the shifting of old rock, yet something about it felt intentional, like movement. His light toward the noise, the beam slicing through the blackness. But all it revealed was the tunnel curving downward, disappearing into shadows. For a moment, he considered turning back, laughing it off in front of his friends, but something stronger tugged at him, curiosity. It was the same pull that had gotten him into trouble more times than he could count. But this time, it felt different. The air was colder here, the smell of earth stronger, tinged with something metallic. His boots scraped softly as he took another step, and then another. The cave seemed to breathe around him, walls narrowing like a throat swallowing him whole. At the edge of his vision, the carvings seemed to stretch farther into the tunnel, leading him deeper, daring him to discover whatever lay hidden in the darkness ahead. Jacob's footsteps echoed softly as he followed the tunnel deeper, the carvings on the wall guiding him like a trail left behind for anyone brave enough or foolish enough to come this far. The air grew damp, and his flashlight flickered once, making his chest tighten until the beam steadied again. Then, just ahead, the passage widened into a hollow chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. At first it seemed empty, but as Jacob's light swept across the floor, his breath caught in his throat. Half buried under dust and loose stone was a wooden chest, its iron hinges rusted, the lid slightly cracked open, as if someone had once tried to pry it free, but never finished. His pulse hammered in his ears. Crouching, he brushed away the dirt with trembling hands, revealing faint engravings on the lid, more of the same strange symbols he'd seen on the cave walls. Carefully, he pushed the lid open, the hinges groaning. loud in the silence. Inside, a pile of old papers sat crumbling with age, their edges brittle and yellow. Tucked among them was a leather-bound journal, its cover worn but intact. Jacob lifted it gently, and a chill ran through him as he read the first line scrawled in dark ink. "If anyone finds this, leave it buried." He swallowed hard, eyes darting to the shadows pressing in around him, but curiosity urged him to turn the page. The writing inside was hurried, uneven, as if scribbled in fear. It spoke of miners who had gone missing, of a curse said to guard the Black Hills, and of something buried deep in this very cave that should never be disturbed. Jacob's grip tightened on the journal, a mix of dread and excitement twisting. Inside him, he knew he should leave, but instead he flipped to the next page. Jacob's fingers trembled as he turned another page. The words scrawled so urgently they almost looked like claw marks across the paper. The journal spoke of shadows moving in the cave, whispers that followed men home, and a secret sealed beneath the earth that demanded to stay hidden. The deeper he read, the colder the chamber seemed to grow, his breath now faintly visible in the beam of his flashlight. Then a sound broke through the silence, a low, dragging scrape like something heavy being pulled across stone. Jacob snapped, his head up, the journal slipping slightly in his hands. The beam of light swept across the chamber, catching nothing but jagged rock and the open chest. Still. The noise persisted, closer now, and with it came the faintest murmur, like a voice. Too distant to understand, yet heavy with intent. His chest tightened, every instinct urging him to run, but his feet stayed rooted. As if drawn by the words on the page, he whispered them aloud. "What sleeps here must not be woken." The cave seemed to respond with a low groan, dust trickling from the ceiling as if the stone itself was shifting. Suddenly, the beam of his flashlight landed on the far wall, where fresh markings, ones that hadn't been there before, gleamed faintly in the dim glow. A single handprint, wet and dark, as though pressed onto the rock just moments ago. Jacob's throat went dry, the journal slipping from his fingers and landing with a dull thud. For the first time, he felt something watching him, unseen but undeniably present. The air grew so heavy it pressed against his chest. And with a sharp exhale, he realized the warning wasn't just words on old paper. It was alive. It had already noticed him. Jacob's pulse thundered in his ears as he forced himself to pick up the fallen journal, his flashlight quivering in his grip. The words on the final pages were smudged, as though written in a rush, but one line stood out. Underlined 3 times, "The cave does not keep secrets, it keeps prisoners." A shiver ran down his spine. A scraping sound returned, louder now, echoing from the tunnel he had entered through. He swung his light in that direction and froze. A figure stood just beyond the beam, tall and crooked, its outline wavering. Like smoke, but solid enough that the crunch of stone under its weight was real. Its eyes, if they could be called, that caught the light with a dull, unnatural gleam. Jacob staggered backward, his heels striking the open chest, sending dust into the air. The figure stepped closer, and with it came a smell of damp earth and rusted iron, the scent of something long buried. The journal slipped from Jacob's hand again, and as it hit the floor, a hidden paper fluttered loose, covered in the same strange symbols that marked the chest. Without knowing why, Jacob pressed the paper flat against the ground. Ow, the cave trembled violently, a deafening rumble shaking the chamber as the figure released a guttural sound. Half growl, half cry. Stone cracked above, sending shards tumbling as the ceiling began to collapse. Jacob darted toward the tunnel, lungs burning, stumbling as rocks fell all around him. He burst into the open air, just as the cave mouth caved in behind him, sealing the darkness inside forever. Gasping, he looked back at the pile of rubble, the earth now silent. In his pocket, the loose page with the symbols remained. Jacob realized the cave might be closed, but its secret wasn't buried with it.